Hey there, Warhammer 40K fans! I've noticed that a lot of you are tuning in, so I'm here to give you what you want. That's right, I'm diving into the world of Warhammer 40,000 with some exciting videos. And what better way to kick things off than by counting down the 40 best video games in the universe? I've scoured through every single Warhammer 40K game, including those in the epic Horus Heresy setting, which takes us back 10,000 years to witness the fall of the Imperium. I'm talking about games that delve deep into the lore and showcase how it all went wrong. But there are a few things that didn't make the cut. Unfortunately, games that were cancelled before release, like the MOBA Dark Nexus Arena, won't be included. And while standalone expansions like Dawn of War, Dark Crusade, and Inquisitor Prophecy are fantastic, they'll be considered part of the original game like any regular expansion. But don't worry, I've still got an incredible selection of games for you to sink your teeth into. Let's get started. This is part 1 of the series, so be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more. Alright Warhammer 40K fans, let's kick things off with some honorable mentions. These might not have made it into the top 40, but they're still fantastic games that deserve a shout out. So buckle up and get ready for some exciting games that just missed the cut.
Carnage Champions.
Carnage Champions was a high-energy side-scrolling auto-runner that combined the thrill of Cannibal with the sheer power of a thunder hammer and a hard-hitting heavy metal soundtrack. Unfortunately, at some point, the game's server was taken offline. As a result, even if you were lucky enough to have downloaded the free-to-play mobile version or purchased the now delisted Steam version, you can no longer play this entirely single-player game. It's a real shame, as the game had a unique and addictive gameplay style that kept players coming back for more. It's a reminder that even the most exciting and enjoyable games can be taken away from us at any moment, leaving us to mourn the loss of what once was.
Kill Team.
This game, which is not related to the budget-friendly tabletop game called Kill Team, is a twin-stick shooter that utilizes assets from Relics Games' Dawn of War 2 and Space Marine. Unfortunately, the game's co-opus feature is limited to local play, which is a disappointment, and having to restart from checkpoints before boss introductions can be frustrating. However, the biggest flaw of the game is the camera, which constantly ends up in inconvenient positions. The player may find themselves staring at unimportant objects like pipes and gantries while 15 orcs attack and shout the same repetitive phrase. This can result in the player's death occurring in areas of the screen that are difficult to see due to the surrounding darkness.
Talisman, the Horus Heresy.
In 1983, Games Workshop unveiled the first edition of Talisman, the magical quest game. It was a board game designed as a race to the center, requiring players to discover a talisman that would allow them to access the board's middle while also preventing others from stealing it. Even if players managed to avoid the interference of other players, the luck of the cards and dice could be unpredictable. Essentially, it was a fantasy-themed snakes and ladders game with a player versus player element. The video game version of Talisman has been rebranded with the Horus Heresy, a prequel setting from 40K's past set 10,000 years ago that has spawned numerous novels, some of which are highly regarded. Unlike the original board game, the Horus Heresy is an extremely serious and intense version of Warhammer 40,000. The game's tone is at odds with the original board game's carefree, chaotic nature, which involved throwing dice and laughing at your misfortunes, with players often getting transformed into toads. In contrast, in Talisman, the Horus Heresy, players might become thrilled to receive a card that adds +1 to their resource stat.
Space Hulk, Vengeance of the Blood Angels.
The attempt to adapt the board game Space Hulk for the second time was unsuccessful, and in fact, it was the worst adaptation. The game is a first-person shooter in which the player takes control of a squad, but for the first 6 missions of the campaign, the player is not able to control the squad. Once control is given, the player must pause to drop commands on the map, which is less innovative than the 1993 predecessor that featured a combination of real-time and turn-based gameplay. Additionally, it is less satisfying than having full control over the squad. The primary issue with Vengeance of the Blood Angels is that it was released during a time when 3D graphics and CD audio were new and experimental and rarely of good quality. As a result, the game features stuttery graphics, and enemies awkwardly pop into rendered CG when close enough for a melee animation. While the Marines are chatty, their dialogue is stitched together from samples, and the way they bark orders at each other is repetitive and grating, making players long for their death. This is especially true for Beth Orr, who shouts his name with the same cadence every time he is selected. The game lacks charm and is not worth the effort of setting up a virtual machine to run it today.
Space Wolf.
Combining 40K and XCOM is such an intuitive concept that it has spawned numerous mods on the Steam Workshop for XCOM 2. However, games that have attempted to blend the two have had mixed success. Space Wolf, for instance, has impressive visual appeal with its dramatic attack zoom-ins, reminiscent of XCOM's gameplay. However, it falls short in execution. The levels are disproportionately small, which creates awkward weapon ranges where even a bolt gun has a meager range of just 4 squares. Additionally, new enemies materialize immediately next to you, leading to a lack of strategic depth. To add to this, each character has a deck of cards that determines their actions, and the only way to attack is by playing a randomly drawn weapon card. While some of these cards can be equipped briefly, most of the time, Marines can only use the weapon card they have drawn. Consequently, a character who has a plasma gun may forget that it exists until another plasma gun card is drawn. Luck of the draw becomes crucial in the game, and a character could randomly have 3 heavy weapons available, which stretches believability as if they are being produced from a bag of holding.
Storm of Vengeance.
Storm of Vengeance is a strategic game that involves protecting your territory from invading enemies, which is similar to Plants vs. Zombies. However, instead of using sunshine to grow plants, players use redemption points to bring dark angels out of their drop pods. The game is reminiscent of an earlier game from Eutechnyx called Ninja Cats vs. Samurai Dogs. Nonetheless, Storm of Vengeance features a progression tree that allows players to unlock frag grenades, a multiplayer mode, and 3D models of orcs and space marines. These models replace the Ninja Cats and Samurai Dogs in the previous game. Overall, Storm of Vengeance requires players to strategize and plan carefully to defend their land against enemy attacks while managing their resources effectively.
Battle Sister.
The initial 40K game designed exclusively for VR has failed to live up to expectations. Although the immersive experience of being able to explore a starship or encounter a space marine is impressive, Battle Sister falls short as a simplistic game with limited pathways. Additionally, the physical controls for actions such as throwing grenades and holstering weapons are inconsistent, leading to frustrating experiences when these actions fail and result in death. The issue is compounded by save points being situated on the incorrect side of a tutorial or an elevator ride, which is an unforgivable flaw in game design. Now, without further ado, let's delve into our comprehensive analysis of the 40 best Warhammer 40,000 video games.
th place, Dawn of War 3.
If you're a fan of real-time strategy games that involve creating a large army and commanding them in massive battles, then the original Dawn of War is the perfect fit for you. However, if you prefer a more focused approach that involves managing a few select units and heroes with unique abilities, then Dawn of War 2 is the game for you. Unfortunately, Dawn of War 3 attempts to blend the two styles and falls short. While the game features elites with unique abilities and some units have special skills, there are long periods where you have nothing to do, leaving you feeling bored and unengaged. In the game's story campaign, you switch between controlling different factions such as Marines, Orcs, and Eldar, but never spend enough time with any one group to become comfortable with their abilities and technology. Each mission feels like a tutorial reintroducing abilities and tech, which can be frustrating. While the first 2 games in the series have passionate defenders, Dawn of War 3 failed to appeal to anyone due to its awkward compromise between army management and hero focus.
39th place, Fire Warrior.
It is surprising to find only a limited number of first-person shooter games based on the 40K universe. Additionally, games that allow you to play as the Tau, a group of mecha enthusiasts in the setting, are also scarce. However, Fire Warrior, which was originally developed for PlayStation 2, is available for play as a corridor shooter. Although the console didn't have any decent FPS games, it's worth noting that Fire Warrior does not focus on mechs. To overcome the broken mouse controls in Fire Warrior, players must activate the auto-aim feature. Nonetheless, the gameplay remains dull due to the unresponsive enemies and lackluster weaponry. Despite this, two aspects of the game stand out. Firstly, the initial encounter with a Space Marine is remarkably realistic, as he appears almost unstoppable. Secondly, Tom Baker, a well-known voice actor, provides fantastic narration for the game's introduction. In conclusion, despite the scarcity of 40K-based FPS games and the lack of TAL-focused titles, Fire Warrior fails to impress due to its poor gameplay mechanics. However, the first encounter with a Space Marine and Tom Baker's narration make it worth checking out.
38th place, Eisenhorn, Xenos.
The novels featuring the character Eisenhorn in the Warhammer 40,000 universe are considered to be some of the best written in the franchise. These books follow the detective-style storytelling of Raymond Chandler, with Eisenhorn as an Inquisitor who faces moral dilemmas while hunting down heretics and uncovering corruption within the Inquisition. The video game adaptation of the first book made a smart decision by casting Mark Strong as Eisenhorn, as he embodies the character perfectly. However, the game falls short in its voice direction and cutscene portrayal of characters, with inconsistent levels of intensity among them. In addition, the game includes various features such as combat, collectible hunting, hacking minigames, and puzzle solving, which seem to have been borrowed from other games and haphazardly put together to fill gaps in the story. The overall experience feels like a low-budget movie tie-in game, but with a tie-in to the book instead.
37th place, the Horus Heresy, Betrayal at Calth.
There are many turn-based games in the 40K universe that involve controlling squads of Space Marines moving from one hex to another. However, Betrayal at Calth sets itself apart by offering a unique perspective. As the player, you command from the viewpoint of a servo skull, a camera that moves around the battlefield, allowing you to appreciate the intricate architecture of the Horus Heresy era up close. What's even more impressive is that the game can be played in VR, immersing you in the 40K universe like never before. The concept of the game is undeniably cool, but it's apparent that the development budget was limited. There is a limited number of unit barks that repeat frequently, and they often come from the wrong direction compared to the unit that's actually performing the action. Additionally, some weapons have animations, while others don't, making the game feel unpolished. Moreover, the mission objectives occasionally lack crucial information, making it challenging to complete them successfully. Betrayal at Calth started as an early access game and was released prematurely due to financial constraints. While it's now available with a version number, the game doesn't feel entirely finished. Despite its flaws, the game's unique perspective and immersive gameplay make it worth playing for fans of the 40K universe.
36th place, Warhammer Combat Cards.
In 1998, Games Workshop released a collectible card game featuring photos of their Warhammer miniatures accompanied by statistics. The game went through several versions, eventually evolving into a free-to-play video game in 2017. While the game is not as complex as Magic: The Gathering, it allows players to build a deck consisting of a warlord and bodyguards, with 3 bodyguards in play at any given time. Players can choose to make ranged, melee, or psychic attacks during their turn, with damage being dealt based on the relevant statistics. Players can also use tactical choices to enhance attacks they choose not to make that turn. The Warlord card is a powerful card that can only be played once and whose death results in a player's loss. Despite the game's potential for player versus player combat, most battles take place against AI-controlled opponents, with the only player versus player battles occurring within clans. However, this information is not clearly communicated to players, and joining a clan can be challenging due to the mobile interface's design.
35th place, Inquisitor, Martyr.
The game Inquisitor Martyr attempts to integrate 3 distinct components. Firstly, it revolves around playing the role of an Inquisitor, delving into the enigmatic puzzles of the Caligari sector, with the most significant among them being the ghost ship known as the Martyr. Additionally, it aims to provide an action-packed RPG experience where prolonged periods without combat are undesirable, and critical damage bonuses and loot quality are vital attributes of the protagonist, a heretic hunting space detective genius. Finally, Inquisitor Martyr is a live service game with seasonal modifications that include global events, short-lived vendors, daily tasks, heroic deeds, no offline mode, and the expectation that players will replay the same monotonous missions for countless hours after every content update. While the action RPG element of the game has its merits, presenting a Diablo-inspired gameplay that incorporates guns, it seems disconnected from the game's other components. For instance, it seems odd that an Inquisitor would dedicate a significant amount of time creating new gear or gathering different colored shards for a new Void Crusade. It feels like every game these days has a similar mechanic of collecting various types of shards, and it can be exhausting to continue collecting them in each game.
34th place, Adeptus Titanicus, Dominus.
The importance of scale is amplified in a setting where billions of lives are lost without any reaction. In the world of 40K, mechs cannot just be regular machines. They are massive titans, godlike machines that can reach up to 100 feet tall and can effortlessly crush Gothic mega-cathedrals underfoot. In Dominus, you take control of maniples of titans belonging to either the Imperium or Chaos, engaging in turn-based combat against each other. Each turn, you command your Titan to move to a certain position and a hologram appears at its final destination. From there, you select which target to attack, and color-coded projections indicate which weapons are within range. Once you commit, your Titan will take 10 seconds to reach its destination, firing its weapons continuously throughout the journey. This can result in some rather strange turns, where much of the shooting is aimed at indestructible rocks or other obstacles that happen to be in the way. The AI in the game tends to shoot even when the odds of hitting are slim, and the cinematic camera often clips inside mountains, further disrupting the flow of gameplay. Another quirk of the game is that you do not plot out the entire path of your Titan, but rather only select its final destination. This can lead to situations where the hologram appears on the opposite side of where you initially intended, forcing you to take a longer, more circuitous route to your destination. Despite these issues, Dominus remains an engaging experience, albeit one that can be frustrating at times. One particular issue is that some missions will grant you a fresh maniple of Titans, only to later require you to complete subsequent missions with the survivors of the previous mission. The game fails to communicate this fact to you, leading to confusion and frustration for the player.
The Emperor's sacrifice is life, as ours is death.
33rd place, Chaos Gate.
Chaos Gate is a tactical game that draws inspiration from classic titles such as Jagged Alliance and XCOM. Unlike XCOM, it has a minimal strategy layer. If you prefer the original XCOM over its modern-less version, Chaos Gate might appeal to you. However, it does fall short in terms of enemy variety. The game pits you against the forces of Chaos, including Chaos Cultists, Traitor Marines, and various types of demon. As the leader of the Ultramarines, you have the ability to rename your troops and equip a limited number of heavy weapons per squad. Unfortunately, the battles tend to feel monotonous after a while, and they tend to drag on due to the Traitor Marine's ability to withstand multiple crack grenades and heavy bolter rounds.
Mission complete.
32nd place, Sanctus Reach.
The classic strategy game Panzer General, with its hex-based game board and counter tokens, has served as a major influence for many Warhammer 40,000 video games. One such game is Sanctus Reach, which features a conflict between the Space Wolves and the Orcs. While Sanctus Reach is not a terrible game, it is rather simplistic. In many cases, the game's objectives boil down to either capturing or defending certain points on the map. Only after several levels of this does the game introduce more varied missions, such as escort missions. The game's storyline is brief, consisting of just a single paragraph of text between levels, and there is no overarching strategy layer to tie everything together. Additionally, the game's presentation, including its unit types, animations, and level design, feels lacking in detail and complexity despite the fact that 40K is a setting known for its maximalist style. As a result, there are other games that offer a similar experience, but do it better.
31st place, Space Hulk, Deathwing.
Deathwing is a first-person shooter similar to Left 4 Dead, where multiple players cooperate to battle, but instead of zombies, it features Genestealers. Unfortunately, when the game was initially launched, it was plagued by several bugs and optimization issues. However, a later enhanced edition was released that resolved many of the most severe problems. Deathwing's multiplayer mode is a tense and immersive experience that emphasizes close quarters combat. Players can personalize their Terminator characters with an array of clothing options, making it even more enjoyable. Nonetheless, the game's single-player mode is flawed due to the illogical behavior of its AI-controlled characters. Even when playing with friends, the melee weapons feel unresponsive, and the shooting mechanics don't feel as satisfying as they could be. Rather than feeling like an intimidating storm of bolts, it feels more like a dribble of water from a hose.
30th place, Space Crusade.
Milton Bradley followed up Hero Quest with a new version of Warhammer 40,000 designed for players aged 10 and up. Once again, Gremlin Interactive developed the corresponding video game. Similar to Hero Quest, the video game is a faithful recreation, but with one exception. Instead of the Genestealers, players fight against a different alien race called Soulsuckers. Although the game is slow-paced, it offers players a choice between music or sound effects, but not both simultaneously. Unlike the board game, the video game lacks the polished miniatures and card art. Despite its flaws, nostalgia plays a significant role in the enjoyment of the game, and the endearing pixelated Space Marines have a special place in the heart of players.
'29th place, Space Hulk.
This is our initial encounter with a dismal future where only tablet-based ports of 40K games exist. The Space Hulk game on iPad mini has all the predictable limitations of a mobile game, and its animations are repetitive. Whether it's the blood spurts around the Genestealers or the 3 red lines indicating a Terminator's death, the game's animation is limited. The way in which Genestealers transform into a pair of bleeding leg stumps after being hit by an assault cannon is unintentionally humorous. Despite its limitations, the game has been improved with the ability to speed up the Terminators, making the game playable without taking forever on each turn. If you're looking for a single-player version of the board game where you get to play as the Space Marines, then this version of Space Hulk is a decent choice.
Weapon jam.
28th place, Gladius, Relics of War.
If you take Civilization V, Warlock, The Exiled, or Age of Wonders and remove the diplomatic aspect, you're left with a game solely focused on warfare. To this, add in elements inspired by real-time strategy games, including base-building mechanics that allow for separate barracks dedicated to infantry and vehicles, and a hero system that enables leveling up and acquiring abilities reminiscent of Warcraft 3. Gladius is an intriguing mashup of various strategy game elements. In its early days, Gladius faced some issues, such as the lack of variety in each campaign due to the early stages of the game being spent clearing out the surrounding areas of bug monsters and dogs. Even with the wildlife setting lowered, this aspect made each campaign feel repetitive. However, with the help of patches and DLC, the game has improved significantly, offering more diversity in gameplay. That said, there are still some annoyances, such as how only the last player in hot seat games can see how the AI moves.
27th place, Space Hulk Ascension.
After receiving negative feedback for the PC version of their previous Space Hulk game, Full Control made significant changes and rebranded it as Ascension. The improvements include a more visually appealing interface and customizable Marine characters. However, the new version has also been met with some controversy due to its deviation from traditional board game mechanics. The game has reduced randomness and now employs an experience-based upgrade system. Additionally, weapon mechanics have been altered, with storm bolters accumulating heat as they are fired and jamming when they reach maximum capacity. The Flamer weapon now has multiple modes of spray rather than filling an entire room or corridor with fire. In an effort to create a more immersive experience, a fog of war has been added to render the map dark beyond a small area of visibility. While some changes are considered unnecessary, overall, the game has improved slightly from its previous iteration.
'26th place, Dakka Squadron.
There are not many Warhammer 40,000 games that allow players to assume the role of aliens, but Dakka Squadron stands out by fully embracing the idea of letting players be an orc. This arcade aerial combat game takes inspiration from Star Fox, but with a distinctly Cockney twist. The game is filled with the constant sound of wailing guitars and orc battle cries, with the emphasis on constant shooting and explosions. Dakka Squadron's dedication to the orc theme is evident in its gameplay, which features orcs against orcs in both the single-player and multiplayer modes. While players eventually get to face off against other enemy factions such as the Adeptus Mechanicus and Necrons, most of the game is spent battling waves of orcs and fighter jets with nose-mounted spikes. The missions can be repetitive, as players face wave after wave of enemies and hear the same combat barks as they shoot them down. However, a recent patch added a 3 lives system to make the game less frustrating for players who don't want to redo an entire mission because they got defeated at the end. One downside of the game's orc-heavy soundtrack is that players may need to turn down the volume on the guitars to avoid getting overwhelmed.
25th place, Shootas, Blood and Teef.
Regarding games designed for orcs, there is a side-scrolling action platformer called Shootas, Blood and Teef that is akin to a fast-paced, green-colored Commander Keen game, or possibly Metal Slug but with squigs. Squigs are toothy fungal creatures that are related to orcs and have a symbiotic relationship with them, serving as their pets, mounts, and tools. In the game, squigs with dynamite strapped to their heads like barrister wigs serve as grenades, while mines are squigs bred to consume explosives until they can no longer walk, and health packs are squigs with surgical head mirrors that can be eaten. The game's entire premise revolves around someone stealing the fuzzy squig that the player was wearing as a wig, which serves as the player's motivation for going to war. Shootas, Blood and Teef captures the essence of orcs, featuring a hard rock soundtrack and characters who use as a form of punctuation. The campaign is relatively short, allowing players to battle against orcs, the Imperium, and Genestealers and complete the game in under 4 hours. There is a co-opus mode for up to 4 players and a cosmetics shop where players can purchase silly hats with the game's currency, Teef. However, the game's brief duration is ideal for a lighthearted one-off experience rather than something players would want to invest in long-term. Although the game was initially unstable upon launch, a few patches have increased its stability.
24th place, the Horus Heresy, Legions.
The current game being referred to as a free-to-play collectible card game set in the Horus Heresy era. Although similar in gameplay to other collectible card games, it lacks the flashy graphics and high-quality card art of big names in the genre, such as Magic, The Gathering Arena. However, it is a reliable example of the form, and if you have the resources, it can be worth investing time and money into it. For those who have read the Horus Heresy books and feel a sense of nostalgia and excitement when hearing phrases such as the Fall of Ispan 3, the game offers an immersive single-player campaign that will allow you to experience the event in the form of a card game. In summary, while not as visually impressive as other collectible card games, the game is still enjoyable and provides an exciting experience for fans of the Horus Heresy series.
23rd place, Freeblade.
Initially, my expectations were not very high when I began playing Freeblade, a free-to-play mobile game adaptation that features loot boxes and multiple currencies. However, the game does have its positive aspects, including the ability to play as an Imperial Knight, a massive mech that is larger than a house, and the option to personalize your walker with various colors and decals, similar to painting a miniature. Essentially, Freeblade is a straightforward rail shooter game, reminiscent of Time Crisis, but with the added benefit of being able to control a character the size of Godzilla. To my surprise, the game exceeded my expectations and turned out to be better than I anticipated.
22nd place, Aeronautica Imperialis, Flight Command.
Flight Command is an action-packed aerial combat simulator that allows you to program your planes with specific maneuvers and watch the resulting dogfighting play out in real time for 10 seconds. The game can be described as a cross between Sid Meier's Ace Combat and the simultaneous turns of Frozen Synapse, providing players with a unique and thrilling experience. Each 10-second round is packed with exciting events, such as one plane dodging an attack from behind, another exploding, and a pilot executing a high G-turn and blacking out. To better view the action, you can switch to theater mode, which shows all the events simultaneously instead of following each pilot's actions. However, a simple way to scrub the timeline back and forth would be useful. Players can also switch their plane's loadouts by removing the default missiles, and pilots can gain skills by shooting down enough enemies. However, all the fighters are relatively similar, and when your ace pilots are shot down, a commander will appear on the between mission screen and inform you that your pilot numbers are depleted. In such a situation, you can call upon reserves, and the game generates randomly generated pilots that are entirely disposable. The game does not judge you for this, since even the top guns are replaceable in 40K. Therefore, Fight Command offers an intense and fast-paced experience that challenges players to make quick decisions and react to constantly changing situations while accepting the fragility of their pilots.
21st place, Legacy of Dorn, Herald of Oblivion.
Games Workshop has released a series of gamebooks known as The Path to Victory, with one of them now adapted into a visual novel. If you've ever read fighting fantasy, Lone Wolf, or choose your own adventure books that encourage you to become the hero, then this is precisely what this game offers. In this game, you are a solitary space marine, separated from your team and stranded on a space hulk. Your objective is to locate and reunite with your battle brothers. Legacy of Dorn's depiction of a ship constructed from the combined remains of several wrecks is strikingly peculiar. Each area is distinct as you investigate it, whether it's overrun with fungus and orcoid or sanctified by the Sisters of Battle. Although the turn-based combat is nothing special, you can choose from a range of difficulty options that allow you to bypass tedious battles and cheat as if you were keeping your fingers in the pages of a book, as is customary. Thank you for watching the first part of our countdown of the top 40 Warhammer 40,000 video games. Stay tuned for the second part coming soon. Please show your support by leaving a like and comment below the video. It lets me know that you're enjoying the content. See you soon.